All right.
Okay, I believe that we are finally live.
Good morning, everybody. Apologies for the delays. My internet, for some reason, was not letting us connect to Facebook live streaming, but we are here now on Brie's page. So, well, on our page using Brie's Zoom. That's it. That we solved that problem really beautifully. And I'm just checking that it's on the Facebook page. Everything is working. That's very exciting. So I'm going to come back to you and check out your gorgeous face. Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think it's will give everyone a different view of the fires and how it's affected everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, when you came into town, into Melbourne last Friday, and I got to spend some time with you, which I was so grateful for, your Uber accidentally took you into the middle of the city, which we didn't necessarily plan for, but it was quite an amazing thing to, I think, for you to kind of see. Here's this giant city that is just business as usual, and life is just proceeding. And I could see your kind of body still in that shock response, being out of the bubble of the fires, as you described it, in your communities where everybody's in a certain state of being to get on with the job, and probably quite raw, I'm guessing, and very vulnerable. And suddenly you're in the middle of this busy, bustling city on a Friday night, and they're just like, whatever. But big shout out to Benefit, who did do your eyebrows for free, because I did make sure they knew that you were coming straight from the fire affected areas. And that compassion is a beautiful thing to witness. But it was a really great opportunity, I think, for me to see how raw, and even though you are such a robust, amazing woman, and you make it all sound like we're just getting on with it, this is huge. And even as of last Friday, you still didn't have power to your house. So it's still no power. It's not like this is like, oh well, the fire didn't burn the house down, we're all okay. So I want you to take us through a little bit of the events of that day when, obviously there was a period of time in advance, but where you knew the fire was coming, but when and how, and just what happened for you in that moment of everything kind of arriving.
Yeah, sure. So I remember a week before the fires, I had messaged my husband, sort of almost feeling a twang of guilt because we weren't fire ravished, and although it's very dry where we are, we're not completely drought ridden either. And he just sort of said, don't worry, Brie, we'll have our turn. And then a week later, there we were, sitting in amongst everything that I've been watching. And the first fires hit on New Year's Eve, and that was really unexpected for most people and for the community. And that really hit 3 or 4 valleys. So in Corryong, it's a small town of about 1,200, but there's all these valleys, like, I don't know, let's say 10 to 12 valleys that sort of converge around Corryong. And so to have that huge fire come through and ravish some of those communities was really devastating. And then we spent literally 4 days preparing for a fire that was to hit our valley and to hit many other valleys around as well. And to give you some context of where I live right where they were expecting the mega blaze to join up, which I thought was funny that they thought it would join up in like our tiny little farming community. So there was one on the Victorian side of the Murray River, and there was one on the New South Wales side. And so I was trapped in between 2 evacuated towns. My fire plan was to always go up the hill to Tombarumba, and I then had to make the decision to evacuate the kids, and I decided to stay behind with my husband and defend the farm. And so that was a really, let's say, unpopular choice amongst, some friends and people that I know. And that had everything to do with the media in the way that they really talked up the fires. And not that I want to talk down the fires. The fires are terrible and they've forever changed people's lives. But the media were really just fear-mongering people, making people feel that if they didn't stay and defend their property, that they were going to die and that everything was going to, spontaneously combust around them. And that is really how I kind of explained to everyone that we survived Armageddon, because that's how it felt at the time. if you listen to the media.
Yeah.
But my choice to stay, I didn't take that choice lightly. Obviously, I have 4 children, and the last thing I would do is leave them, without parents. Of course, and interestingly, people sort of looked at it like, oh, you're choosing your house, you're choosing things over your children.
Yeah.
And that really wasn't the case. So we live in grassland, we don't live in the bush. And we prepared the house so well. My husband he's actually been through fires before, so he knew what he was doing, and I trusted him completely. But I also trusted my own intuition, which said stay and help and defend. And I just knew that I was needed there at that time, for after the fire. But before the fire, it was if I wasn't there to prepare the house and stay with the house and know that that was going to be okay, I knew that it would take away my husband's focus, which was on saving the cattle, saving the hay so that they could feed the cattle, because when your grass is burnt, you have nothing to feed your cattle. So he was really focused on the cattle and keeping the hay and keeping all of that so that he could keep his cattle going as well. And so my choice to stay was completely made out of love. I did lose it. Oh, I say that I freaked out at one point, and that was a barrage of messages from people, you need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave. And it was a really cool lesson for me as an intuitive guide. Obviously, I pride myself in my ability to trust my intuition. And so it was a real pivotal moment for me, because it was amazing how other people's fear really got to me. And I did almost leave. I almost left out of fear. And thinking of leaving actually made me feel physically sick, and I actually physically couldn't leave. And so we prepared the house and we stayed. And so I stayed at the house of my father-in-law, Phil. So I got to have a big bonding day with him, which was good. And he's fought many fires before. We had like a big tractor. We had, we were so prepared. And then when the fire came, it really came quite quickly, and it left quite quickly. Like, it was just a fast-moving grass fire. And after the fire left us, and I just want to say as well, we didn't have a lot of like RFS and a lot of help. Like, we knew that if we stayed, we were there on our own. And the whole community, which is what I love so much, is that the whole community, everyone that stayed behind, like really banded together. And to hear the men on the two-way talking about the fire's here, it's going here. And then, my husband kept going with the fire. So he stayed with everyone else fighting the fire wherever it went, saving property, sheds, houses, cattle, whatever they could. And then we had a few workers back on the farm. And it was literally, so the fire hit around 3 or 4, and it was literally the whole night was then spent continuing to put out spot fires, to put out, like there were spot fires near the hay. Toby was protecting his unharvested crops, because obviously they're worth a lot of money. And so had we left, had we all of us left and no one was there, our whole valley would be gone. That fire would have gone through quite quickly. But then the things that are left burning, that's what destroys houses, and that's what brings the hay down and burns the cattle. So that's why we stayed, because we knew that we were prepared enough. And this is a big difference. If you're not prepared, you have to leave. We were so prepared, knowledgeable. The farm has 2 fire trucks, because you need to have fire trucks when you're harvesting anyway, because headers go up in flames. And so that was why we chose to stay.
Yeah. And I love that you're sharing such deep insight, because that decision to stay or go, we obviously we were in contact on that day, and I affirmed that I totally trust your intuition, and that you had to be with yourself with that. But I think what you're sharing is really invaluable for those of us who are not part of rural communities, don't have any knowledge of how farming works. You're in a fairly unique position that you're not a family farm, you're a commercial farm. Is that the right sort of language? So you mentioned something about the idea that you know, your husband's knowledge and experience, but the number of people that you had to support you, the preparation that you had, the equipment that you had,
Yeah.
put you in a different position to, say, a small family farm where they, and you know, obviously a lot of those farms did lose everything. Whereas I think what was, you obviously kept your house, but there was still massive losses on your farm.
Yeah, so and that is a really big difference, is that, I mean, ours is still a family farm, but it's a much bigger family farm. And Toby has backpackers that work in there. We also had the owner, Stuart, there, and his daughters. Like, you know, we had a lot of people there defending. And, you know, many farmers were left to defend their farm on their own because their wife had left with the children, or for whatever reason. And that definitely makes a huge difference, because one person can only do so much. And so a lot of the family farms around the area have lost so much. Like, they've lost, so we've lost 80%, 87%, sorry, of all our grassland, which means that we've had to destock, move cattle off the farm, because the dirt after a fire is so fragile. And it's so fragile. Wind, we've had really bad rain as well, which luckily we haven't had it, but other people have, which has caused flooding, which has just stripped them all of their topsoil. And so for a farmer to come back from that is literally years, because that topsoil is all that broken down minerals and plants and all of that stuff. That's what makes topsoil. Like, it's invaluable for a farm. Without it, everything will sort of struggle to grow until it's built up again. And so a lot of these family farms, not only did they lose a lot of stock, and I think that's the hardest part for a farmer, because despite what people see around farms and animals and things, these farmers love their animals. And some of these animals, and these cows and sheep, you know, they have been running the same lines for generations, and they're more than just money. They're loved so much. And so to see these farmers, you know, crying and putting down their sheep and their cattle because they're injured or they're burnt, or they can actually get a respiratory issue as well from the smoke and from the ash. This is where farmers will, I believe, will need help in the future. Once all the dust settles, there's going to be a lot of, I believe, mental health problems or sadness, or people really needing to speak about what happened, because there's just so much, it's just a very somber place at the moment. Everyone sort of says, hey, how you going? And we all say good, but we really know that everyone's not doing very well, and that everyone is struggling. But yes, I know, I mean, there's countless family farms that have lost, they may not have lost their house. And I think it's a really important point to make, is before these fires, I thought, oh, if you've saved the house, you're okay, everything else is replaceable. And it's actually not the case. They've lost their livelihood, they've lost their stock, they've lost their hay, they've lost their sheds, they've lost their machinery. They've really lost a way to provide for their families, and they can't do the one thing that they love to do.
Yeah. And, you know, the consequences, as you said, for a small farm versus a larger farm in terms of insurance levels and their capacity to recoup what they've lost, and in a timely fashion. And a lot of stories are already being shared in the media about the delays in getting not just fundraise funds, but even, you know, insurance funds and all the rest of it to people. And I think part of why you and I wanted to talk today was really to keep the momentum going around the support that we can offer, which in our community, of course, is definitely about fundraising, but also about consciousness raising and holding these communities in our prayers. And that's not just a nice idea. Of course, we understand the truth of that, of how we work energetically, and continuing to show up in gatherings where we can, in meditation, and continuing to give our energy and our time and our thoughts and our money, if possible, to this ongoing, like, multi-year catastrophe. It's not, as you say, oh, thank God the house didn't burn down, now it's back to business as usual.
And I want to highlight that for me, over this whole fire period, and, you know, literally living in the middle of that mega blaze, is it's really made me conscious of what the media is saying, because they've misquoted friends of mine. They've misquoted many people, and these people feel so much shame and embarrassment over being misquoted, and it's not fair. Like, it's not fair on these poor people who are devastated, upset, trying to comprehend what's just happened, and now they're being it's just all this sensationalizing that the media has done, when the truth is bad enough. There's no need to make it worse, or to make it look bigger than it is, because the fact is, and not just my community, many communities around Australia are really, really struggling. And I don't want to forget about the drought as well, and I know that people have sort of brought the drought up a couple of times too. This is going to be such an ongoing problem, because we're supplying my area and areas like mine that have been burnt all down the coast everywhere. We're supplying the drought-stricken areas with feed for their cattle and their horses. And so, where is this going to come from? So it's going to be felt massively. Like, whole wineries have lost all their grapes, whole apple orchards gone, cherry orchards. Like, it's going to be felt for a very long time. And I want people to be conscious of that when they're in the supermarket. So when they see that apples are more expensive, don't whinge about it. Just acknowledge why and accept why. If milk prices go up, there's hundreds of dairies around where I live, so milk prices, probably will go up. And I think that instead of whinging about it, and instead of going for the cheaper and perhaps imported item, to really acknowledge why the price has gone up, and to know that by continuing to buy those more expensive Australian products, you're helping farmers more than you would ever know.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and an insight that those of us who are completely separate from the food, growing industry in Australia and don't really understand how it all works, you're providing such incredible insight to what the consequences are now. Like, if we don't start or continue to invest in these places that can grow our food, they will never recover to do that. And then we become entirely reliant on importing our food. And that seems like a pretty dangerous situation for us to be in, because we're so isolated in Australia.
I heard my husband tell one of his friends yesterday that because of the drought and now the fires, Australia actually isn't producing enough wheat and cereal crops for our own local market. And so I'm sure it's the same with other crops. Obviously, wheat is one of the crops that we grow. And so that's a really important thing to remember as well, is that we export a lot of this stuff for income as well. And it's just not there. And so our country really is in crisis, and the media hang on to the exciting, sensationalized fires and flood and hailstones. And, I think that our country is obviously very angry at us, but we need to look deeper than that. And really, I think, a lot will come out as the weeks and months and years fly by, because they will fly by. But just being conscious of what you're buying at the supermarket, or shopping in smaller communities or locally, like, it makes such a difference. And I saw firsthand what Buy from the Bush did for small communities. And now someone started up a fire-ravaged one as well. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who they lost all their feed and everything. She makes cute little baby clothes. She put her site up on this, I don't know what page it was, but a fire, one to help fire-ravaged communities and small businesses. And her site sold out in seconds.
Wow.
So that really helps build morale. It brings economy into our little towns. And so, keep doing things like that, because you're helping people like me. You're helping, mums with 3 or 4 kids who have a hobby to bring in a little bit of extra income, but that little bit of extra income at the moment is life-saving.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such simple gestures, and making that, as you say, I love that word, conscious. Like, be conscious about where you're channeling your resources. You might say, well, I can no longer afford to donate to funds like bushfire funds, but I can make a choice to, yeah, maybe I find someone like that woman you mentioned, and I buy the next lot of birthday presents from her rather than going to, you know, to Big W or Target or whatever. And in the same way, when you're at the supermarket, making that commitment to keep buying Australian produce, even though there may be that couple of years even of you know, turnaround in terms of prices, what we will gain is so much more. So, my darling, you mentioned that ongoing, you know, impact. You know, we know from just the research and the science and the evidence that often in regional and rural communities, mental health is a big issue anyway. They're under-resourced. There's not a lot of support. There's a lot of isolation, and now there's, even though we've seen the great power of communities really coming together. Once that energy and that heat, to pardon the pun, goes out of it, there will be the isolation exacerbated by the trauma of no money. And what is it that you know, you felt very strongly that you needed to be in your community around the time of the fire? What is it that you feel like you wanted to be there for, and what is it that you're going to keep offering?
So initially, you know, I really stayed, when it comes down to it, I stayed to support my husband. And because I knew what he was doing was such a big thing, and I just wanted to be support, whether that was, you know, making him food because he loves food. You know, and so for some of my friends that left, like, I washed their husbands' clothes for them, I made them food, I made, you know, so it was like every little bit of support sort of helps during that time. And, you know, people aren't ready now to talk about it and to go into their feelings because they're still sitting in it. They're still sitting in fight or flight. They're still building fences. And there really is an incredible amount of support there already. You know, people helping build fences and like all this food. And there's this beautiful pay it forward thing going around in Corryong. And I hope it's in every other community as well, of, you know, grocery vouchers and massage vouchers and meat vouchers, and, you know, so there is a lot of support there. But long term, you know, once the dust settles, and the dust might not settle for some people for 6 months, they don't have time to sit back and see what's gone or what's happened. And I think that this is when when the dust settles and it's out of the media, everyone will forget about it, and it will be like, oh, look, the grass is growing again, you know, you're fine. But I don't really know what I'm trying to say. But
I think you're articulating it beautifully, and I think, you know, I've heard you express that desire to be a resource to your community through the tools that you have, when the time is right. And, you know, thinking about our work as spiritually fierce women and men as part of this community is I feel like there's just we shouldn't underestimate what we can be doing energetically to support your community and all the other fire affected communities. And, you know, that's why we're having the Spiritually Fierce gathering. You know, there's one in Scotland, for heaven's sakes. There's so much love pouring in, but, you know, to continue to create opportunities just to gather together and be together. And I think that is a really powerful role that you can play in your community, even now, even if it's not, let's talk about our feelings, but actually let's just hang out together and be in that space, because you know what you're doing energetically is so powerful.
Yeah, and I think that was what I was trying to say, is that the reason I stayed, and the reason and you know, everything that's going on in this community is just so that people just know, like, I can feel the support and the love from you and from everybody, and I know that everyone else in the community can too. And it really does help you keep putting, you know, that foot in front of the other. And I really feel that our communities will be bonded in a different way after this disaster, and we'll just continue to deepen into friendships and relationships. And I think that in turn will really help people mentally as well.
Yeah. I think there's, you know, for those of us who are not on the front line as you are, but are, you know, walking our talk and doing this work and making service part of our life, this is a great opportunity to enact spiritual discipline, which is to remember the laws, that all is one. And just because my house is unaffected and my kids go back to school next week and I've got everything I need to function normally, maintaining that consciousness, not to cause myself harm by thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't feel good because there are people suffering, but to remember all is one. And every day I can hold an intention for whatever is required in these fire affected communities. I can hold the energy at the highest possible vibration. And that's an act of discipline for those of us who are not looking at it and living it and still running, a generator to get power to our homes. And never did. We never, the worst thing that happened to me is my eyes got a bit sore because the smoke came in, how inconvenient for me. But I do think this is I guess for me, a call out to all of us who say we're on this path of service to remember. And yes, it's right here in front of us in Australia right now. But as you say, as the days go on, it will become less and less newsworthy, and the sensationalism will be gone, and it will be some other crisis, and it will be some other situation, or it will be politicking. But we can maintain our spiritual discipline to keep showing up and to keep holding ourselves accountable energetically, and in all the other ways, very practical ways you mentioned, which is so useful, because I do think a lot of people want to be doing things and don't necessarily know what the best course of action is. And you've given us so many great, simple, actionable things, as well as getting in the car and coming to visit you, which is entirely possible now.
Yeah. And do you know what? There's actually we have a lot of events around Tumbarumba and Corryong. We've got the Man from Snow River, we've got the Batlow Cider Fest, we've got Tumberfest, and they're all still going to go ahead. And it's important for people just to come along to those as well. Like they're great fun. I mean, who doesn't love cider? Who does, so bringing awareness to events like that as well. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, and that was just about the collective energy of Corryong. It is very somber and it is very sad. And I think, if anyone who knows me knows that I live in the most picturesque place. It's green and glorious and abundant, and everyone's now living in a black and white world. And I think that's where the heartbreak comes from, is that that we're so used to that picturesque, and then to see everything that you sort of love about the place gone, like that's what is heartbreaking. And then you've got all these people, all these incredible people around the place. Some who haven't been, let's say, their place didn't catch on fire because the whole community's been affected, but their place didn't burn. And then they feel immense guilt because their place didn't burn and their friends did. And so, I think if we can, as spiritual leaders, hold those people, and hold the whole community, and that is what is going to help people as well, because the amount of guilt that is being felt, I felt guilt because our place wasn't burnt as much as other people's. It sounds so silly when you say it out loud, but it's there. And then when I reached out to a few of my girlfriends about, geez, I just feel like this massive amount of guilt, and one of them, she said to me, we all do. We all feel that guilt. And it's like you could never do enough to help people who have suffered so much. And then they get the beautiful lesson in receiving help.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you share that. And I think that, that idea is, just what we can be doing for those of us who are not dealing with the hugely complex psychological situation that you're in as well, and that we can, as you say, nobody's unaffected by this really globally, but those who are there where you are really dealing with it in the front lines. And I feel really inspired by this conversation. I feel really grateful that you've taken this time as well, because I know it's so raw for you, and it's your life and your livelihood and your husband's livelihood and his mental health and your children and your relationships, and everything is impacted. And still you keep on doing all the things for the Institute and showing up as a mentor. And I'm so grateful for that. I just think you're remarkable. And I want to do what I can for you, which is why we are having the Spiritually Fierce gatherings all around Australia and the world, in Melbourne on February 1st, and I'll share the details for that, and you can find the details for all the other Spiritually Fierce gatherings on the Institute page. And I really encourage anyone who's listening to get along. It is a lovely thing to give your money if you can, but giving your time is another level of commitment, and giving your time to show up to raise consciousness for those men and women and children and wildlife and farms and communities who've been so badly affected. That to me is a bigger testament of devotion. And I'd ask you all to, I know it's a busy time of year and everybody's getting kids back to school, but see if you can take a couple of hours out of your schedule and get along to this or any other event that's happening to support these communities.
Yeah, and I just want to add one other thing, and that's about donating to GoFundMe accounts and whatever it is. Just be really careful who you do give your money to, because I think it's really important that you know exactly where your money is going. And we spoke about the debacle with Celeste Barber's campaign, although it was done out of pure heart and wanting to raise money. But being really careful with, or consciously choosing who you spend your money with. And sometimes you don't have to donate to a GoFundMe page or a charity. Ring up a butcher in Mogo or Corryong, or a fire-affected area, and donate $100 to them that they can then gift to another farmer who's lost a lot of stuff. So it doesn't have to be to one of these big GoFundMe accounts. Like, it can be as simple as sending $5 off to a town somewhere as a voucher for something. So it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be a little, but it just makes a really big difference. But just make sure that you're really conscious of where you're spending your money.
Yes, and we, of course, we're taking your counsel and advice on where the funds we raise from our events will be going. And I love that idea of the immediacy of getting money or resources into the hands of people now, as soon as possible, today, like if we can, and rather than having to go through layers and layers of bureaucracy and administration. As you say, even though intentions are good, it's not necessarily going to make anybody's life better today, and that's what we want to be doing. All right, my darling, I'm so grateful for your time. And I don't know who's been watching, because I've been here with you just completely absorbed. You share these ideas so powerfully. And I really feel like you're an incredible ambassador at this time for your community, and energetically, as well as being able to convey these ideas and help us city folk who are so, for me, I'm so far removed from your world. I literally don't have any understanding of it. And I feel so much better informed about how to support and just how to, to give you what you need as well, and everyone around you right now.
Thank you, Nikki. I really
deserve you.
I feel all the love of you and all of my sisters. And if anyone has any questions about, the fires or families that they want to help, or, anything, questions, whatever, please feel free to reach out to me and ask away, because it's the only way. I feel like speaking to someone like me is the only way that you will really know the truth of the fires, because what's been put in the media is not the complete truth.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That's incredibly generous. But I think if you're happy to do that, I think there's a lot of people who really want to understand and know more about what they can be doing right now.
Yeah.
All right, beautiful woman, over to you to end us, because we're on your Zoom. It's such a lovely pleasure to spend time with you. Mwah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
That was not stopped. It won't stop now.